So good evening, everyone, and welcome into this very warm and cordial circle of elders on this beautiful winter's day in the East, which must not be so beautiful, but perhaps threatening winter's day in the West. So we keep everyone in mind. And we are just grateful to be together again and to be guided into the deepening grace and challenge of eldering in grace. And so we turn our conversation over to our brother Danny, who will guide us this evening. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Always a pleasure to be with you and my friend Carlos, of course, our colleague in this effort, and so many faces I can see now. I know some from the past. Is that Pat Monahan from the past? Oh my goodness. Hello, Pat.
Yes. Hi, Danny.
Oh, yeah, it's been many years.
I know. I was so thrilled to discover you.
Well, welcome, and let me catch you up. I'll summarize where we are in our journey that Kathleen described as eldering in grace. First of all, we shared some meaning about what eldering is. It's more about integrating and handing on than simply aging, a choice and a commitment, in other words. Then we situated ourselves in a bigger context, a cosmic context, in fact, where we human beings give a self-aware, self-conscious form to the unfolding universe. And we concluded that living our truest self constitutes our unique contribution to this mystery. So today we want to turn our attention towards how. How are we to be elders in this larger cosmic context, in this strange, unfolding and almost falling apart world at the same time? And so we'll begin by looking at I think it's a foundational practice and skill which can be described simply as presence. And this will involve both presence as making this space for doing this work, as well as practicing skills for being more truly present in the sense of aware and engaged. I believe this will build on our exploration last time of our true self, because discovering and accessing our true self and then living from this place, I think, is all about being present and aware. I would go a little further and suggest that finding my real self is essentially awakening to an awareness of reality, which we have described already as interbeing. Finding myself then is experience a kind of real presence, which may mean something special to the Catholics among us, where there is the tradition of preserving what we called the Blessed Sacrament, meaning the bread of the Eucharist, to symbolize the presence of God among us. There was always a lamp permanently burning before this Blessed Sacrament, like the eternal flame. And we were directed as children, I remember so well, to bless ourselves every time we passed a church as a way of acknowledging this essential reality of real presence. Let me invite our friend, the 13th century Persian poet we call Rumi, into our gathering. This is what he says about real presence. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. Isn't that a fascinating statement? Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. This field is clearly the reality of interbeing, where Anything that separates ideas, language, is illusory. It doesn't make any sense, Rumi says. Rumi is also describing the practice of making space, expanding awareness by being present. That includes getting beyond assumptions and the judgments they create, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. In this experience of reality as interbeing, I realize that the self I seek and attempt to live by is much greater and much more amazing than anything I can imagine. Some of us spoke of our encounters in the breakout rooms where we had the experience of meeting a stranger as if we had known them all our lives. I think it was Mickey brought that up the last time. Echoing Rumi's statement, when the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. Mystics and poets who try to describe their experiences of a deep encounter with life through anything, a place, a moment, a person, a feeling, say similar things. Reality experienced in this deeper, direct, non-dualistic way dismantles all assumptions and their judgments, and sometimes renders us simply speechless. The biblical prophets had a similar initial response that reflects this inability to find words. Like the prophet Jeremiah responded when he encountered God, I do not know how to speak. I am only a child. The beginning of eldering work, then, is surely the experience of a reality that we can't find words for. Or perhaps more accurately, and certainly more helpful, the challenge is easy explanations or definitions. An interesting starting point for the work of presence, right? Certainly it has implications for everything, including the self we have been exploring as our essential identity and the fundamental contribution we have to offer the world. In the language of the Buddhist world, if eldering is about accessing and sharing wisdom, then the process is finding a new center and a new operating system that transcends the way we have learned to live by first recognizing my true nature beneath or beyond the small self of survival, then affirming my true nature from this center, and then proceeding accordingly in a fresh, unimpeded way, unimpeded by the assumptions, judgments, defensiveness, and reaction that characterize my normal way of living. So let me ask Kathleen to read the Rumi piece again. It's wonderful to hear a female voice, another voice certainly other than my own in this. Kathleen, would you do us the honor? I think you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense.
Thank you, Kathleen. So let's begin our conversation today by connecting, which we're beginning to see is the first stage of our mindfulness dialogue method or process, but also the first stage in accessing my true nature. By connecting to ourselves and to one another at a deeper than usual place, we will also create the space, or what we sometimes call the container, in which we can generate new understanding together. And so we'll begin this connecting through a short mindfulness exercise, after which we'll get a chance to share in pairs. And Carlos will break us into breakout rooms so that we can get a chance to respond to what's already moving in us, I've no doubt, in the light of that Wonderful piece by Rumi. But first, let me invite you into a simple mindfulness meditation on presence. So position yourself comfortably, relaxed but also alert, your back straight, your hands in your lap, your eyes closed or softened if you like. And take 3 deep breaths. In through your nose and out through your mouth, exhaling completely. Now breathe normally. And where you feel tension in your body, breathe into that place and breathe out the tension. Do this for a few moments. Now notice the thoughts that are running around in your head and simply let them melt, as it were, by paying attention to your breath as you breathe in and out deliberately. In your mind, softly say the theme of today, presence. Repeat the word like a mantra almost. Let it settle into your body. Presence. Now see if you can call to mind an experience when you felt completely present to someone or some place or some event. What was it like? Bring up as many details as you can. Did your sense of time change? Did time stop? Could you hardly distinguish between you and the other? Were you absorbed? Lost? Was there a feeling of rightness, equanimity? What were the sensations in your body, in your mind? And just for a moment, this thought, where was the location of this experience? Was it in your head? Was it in your body? Was it nowhere? See if you can stay in this moment just a while longer. This taste of presence. And in this last few moments of this mindfulness exercise, be present to this moment now. And gently, if your eyes were closed, open your eyes and let's come back together. I'm going to ask Carlos to break us into pairs. It'll be random. I think, as Mickey said last time, it is such a moving aspect, I think, of this gathering. To meet with someone, there's a sense of intimacy that even even in Zoom, even in the Zoom form. So here's what I want you to share about for. We'll take a good 10 minutes. It's an experience like we've just been working with, remembering. Like Rumi describes, and be out of your body, in love, in the zone. And let's see where that takes us. Let's see where that takes us. Could have happened anywhere. With a child in a garden, sports even, music. And perhaps it wasn't even joyful. It may have been painful or tragic. So Carlos will send us off and enjoy, literally. I know that it will be enjoyable and a real enjoyment. So let me explain to those that haven't been with us before. Clearly, if we were to hear a report back from every breakout room, it would take a long time. So we're trying to develop the notion of a representative voice that gives form to our emerging collective identity, which is forming as we talk with each other and interact with each other. And it has proven to be quite fascinating. So what we'll do here, we'll hear from 4 people. Listen to yourself. If you feel moved to share what happened in your breakout room, or just what's moving in you, realize that you're speaking on behalf of this evolving group, this evolving identity. If you don't speak, just listen and hear this as our emerging voice. We're experimenting with something that I think is very real. At least so far, that is what has happened. So I'll call on 4 people randomly. Anyone who feels moved, let's hear. And don't be shy about it. Put your hand up. There are 2 screens, so you shout out if you don't see me acknowledging you, or if I don't see you. Just jump right in. Otherwise, go ahead, Sue.
Well, as always, these breakout rooms are just so much fun because I also identified with that feeling of having met someone I've already known my whole life. We had so much in common, and trying to define what it was about presence that felt so different from non-presence. And I didn't ask Patrick for permission to represent us, but I think he would be okay because we did agree. We felt so fully engaged, not scattered. We felt like we were collected as a whole person. And I know I have a tendency to be scattered all over the place, lots and lots of different things going on, lots of I mean, every morning it's like waiting to see what's going to be the adventure of the day from somebody, friend, family, mainly children or grandchildren, but trying to be present to that right away and not to let myself go down all the paths of distraction. It's not necessarily the path of destruction, but it's definitely distraction. And I've stopped watching the morning news for that very reason. I can't take it anymore. And so I'm just only responding to family or friends and doing my reflection and meditation. And it helps so much. And it was also, as you mentioned, Danny, it is a feeling of joy of being in that place when you're totally centered and you feel all together. And it feels like the wonderful Rumi poem, um, out beyond feelings of wrongdoing or right doing, out beyond judgments or anything. You're just totally present to the spirit. I feel that way. It's the spirit moving among this group, any group, and also between my conversations with others when I can make myself, just as the word says, be totally present. And so I think it makes it very exciting to be human, is what I think.
It's wonderful, Sue. Thank you so much. I saw Marjorie had raised her hand. I didn't see you. Wherever you are, Marjorie,
I'm
jump in.
here.
Go ahead, love.
Hi, I'll just represent, we had 3 in our group from 3 different corners of United States. And we were talking about, maybe from the line in the poem about the field, I don't know, but all 3 of us connected with our deepest experiences of presence being when we were in solitude walking. And so we compared notes about that. Jerome also walks and looks at birds. Being with a bird brings him into full presence. And then we discussed about why being with another was so distracting, as Sue just said. And it's because you're sort of back in the field of judgments and small ego, small self land. And it's much more difficult to stay in that centered, very wide sense of presence when you're with another. You kind of get shoved back into your small, whoever you are, whatever your name is. We could have gone on for a long time. We were in a rich discussion there. So I thank both of those people very much.
That's wonderful, Marjorie. The word interbeing came up in the reflections. It's clearly a word that emerged out of the world and school of Thich Nhat Hanh that many of you are familiar with. And so who else would like to pick up on this fascinating unfolding of your experience of presence? Don't be shy. Just jump right in.
Yeah.
Am I seeing anyone? Oh, I see Anne and Bill.
Bill is not here today, but I met another Anne, and both of us had Anne without an E. So that was very special. We felt connected immediately. And where we went were experiences with people who are dying. And both of us have had that experience. Anne shared just a poignant, beautiful story. I hope, Anne, you don't mind if I share about a very best friend for many years whom she helped escort. And, you know, with medication and everything, people usually are pretty quiet. And then all of a sudden he opened his eyes and he just had, they were shining with joy. And he just said it was beautiful. And then he closed his eyes. And it reminded me of experiences at Bread and Roses, our AIDS hospice in Georgetown, in Reading, when there were similar experiences. And I've been with a close friend dying as well. And if you're not afraid and you're just there and you lose your ego, you lose your opinions, you're just being in whatever it is you're feeling. And to me, it's the greatest privilege in the world.
This conversation is going in fascinating directions for me, and I'm sure for all of us.
That is the field in which talking about meeting.
Precisely. And it will have implications for many things as we continue this conversation. I am sure you mentioned death and dying and the implications of that, of presence for that. Maureen had her hand up. Maureen Lamarche. Are you there, Maureen? Are you able to? You're kind of coming in and out a little bit. Can you unmute? Got it. Go for it.
Yeah,
Mary.
can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. I'm a sister, so my experience is a little different perhaps from many. I spent 50 years in Japan. I'm back in Canada now with Zen retreats at the Jesuit-run Zendo. Father Enomir LaSalle was the director, SJ. And I shared with the group my experience of sitting. I made all my 8-day retreats. I made a 30-day retreat there. And being in touch with your breath, and that certainly brings a presence. But I had one experience that I wanted to share, and that was one time my breath was so almost not there. There was like a pinpoint. And I was so aware that is my life. If that stops, I'm gone. And I've never forgotten that moment. I've never had it again. But it's because of practicing for so long. I've had many other close encounters, but that particular moment was very stayed with me, that how important the gift of breath is. And so that even when someone is dying, that's their last breath. And so I've never forgotten that feeling in the pit of my stomach of where you're breathing. And I do continue to sit, and I repeat Abba, Father. And my mind is, as Henry Nouwen said, filled with snakes and ladders. But what I find is, even if the meditation time is, just full of distractions, you do your best. And during the day, it comes back. And that's the importance, I think, of prayer in the morning. Whether it's sitting or not, doesn't have to be that. But just that quiet something later in the day when you get upset or somebody upsets you, somehow that can sustain you because you have that presence. You had it in the morning and it doesn't go away. So that was what I wanted to share.
And
The
that was,
importance of really some kind of prayer. Yeah.
I think, the
Presence.
interesting thing too, whether one uses the word prayer, certainly practice. It's a deliberateness to cultivate a presence that allows you to keep coming back, even when you drift off inevitably, and to come back.
I'd like to say hello to, I'd like to say hello to Kathy Malloy, who came on, my same community, I'm pretty sure, and haven't seen her in years.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Years and years. She was in Africa and I was in Japan. So hi, Kathy.
And me too, Maureen. I'm a congregation of Notre Dame sister as well.
Yes.
Oh, it's
Coming out of
lovely.
Yes, Kathleen is also.
And
All
I'm
my
an
American-
associate of the Congregation of Notre Dame.
Yes,
Patty.
Is this a takeover?
yes, little country here.
The revolution.
over.
The revolution has already begun, huh? That's wonderful. Well, why don't we use a
We're all
moment?
aging together.
Let's take a moment and notice what it feels like to be present in this way to each other, even across the miles. And that we have managed to do that by just coming together the way we've done in the past half hour or so. And just feel that. Notice and appreciate this presence to one another and to ourselves in a bigger sense and in an expanded sense. and see this as a kind of container that we've created now. And for what we want to do in our second stage is explore this theme of presence. We're saying many things, and this will give us an opportunity to just unpack it a little bit. And here we're talking about real presence to the real presence. That we're suggesting is the reality of interbeing that underpins our lives and the life of the unfolding universe. Now, there's a big statement. Those of you that have participated before in this stage of what we call exploring, mindfulness dialogue consists of 3 stages: connecting, which we've just done. And as a result, we've created this amazing space now. Now we're going to, in that space, explore. And to help us explore this theme of presence, we use a catalyst. I'm going to share this screen and ask Kathleen to read this amazing poem by R.S. Thomas. He's a Welsh poet. Was an Anglican priest. He died some years ago. But it's called The Bright Field. And I think it touches on something that will really catalyze our conversation. Kathleen, could you? I think you're muted. Here we go.
I have seen the sun break through to illuminate a small field for a while, and gone my way and forgotten it. But that was the pearl of great price, the one field that had treasure in it. I realize now that I must give all that I have to possess it. Life is not hurrying on to a receding future, nor hankering after an imagined past. It is the turning aside like Moses to the miracle of the lit bush, to a brightness that seemed as transitory as your youth once, but is the eternity that awaits you.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'll leave the poem up on the screen here and muse on it a little bit, if you can indulge me. First, there's the ordinariness of the experience, the sun breaking through to illuminate just a small field for a while, and the understandable response of hardly noticing, simply going one's way and forgetting. You can all probably identify with this, feeling the beauty of a sunset or a flower or a mountain or a starlit night, but then simply moving on as if this were all normal. But then later, perhaps in the light of an awakening, inspired by something or someone else, like a poem or a song, there comes the realization that this ordinary experience was much more. The pearl of great price, the one field that had treasure in it, and that I had missed it because I've become dulled or distorted or separated from an entire level of experience. I think we can all appreciate that in our world of the constant bombardment of our senses that dulls us to the depths of a moment, any moment, we miss what we now see is the truth right beneath our noses. The poet elaborates on how we need to free ourselves from this prison imposed on us by society, though actually internalized by ourselves. For I am my own prison keeper, who has the key to my own freedom and my ability to act appropriately. I also know instinctively what I need to do in order to open this door of my prison. I must let go of all my assumptions, learn to be truly present without attempting to control, even by defining. As the poet says, I realize now I must give all that I have to possess it. This freedom to be present, to see and choose and be. The poet then describes this prison of our own making, or at least of our own acceptance and participation in it. Life, he says, is not hurrying on to a receding future. I get that one. Nor hankering after an imagined past. Another one. Feelings we all experience in our frantic culture, but in a particular way, at least for me, in our later years when time seems to be slipping away from us. No, he proclaims, life is really learning to possess the beauty of these everyday moments by turning aside, like Moses, to the miracle of the lit bush and learning to be present. I love this biblical analogy for a number of reasons. Some of you may be familiar with the plant Euonymus alatus, or burning bush, which is its common name. The plant really does look like it's on fire sometimes, but perhaps a more important point here is that the plant is everywhere. It's actually an invasive that people see as destructive of biodiversity. But here, it's highlighting the fact that beauty is everywhere, and that the issue is really our capacity to pay attention and see, to be present, in other words. Living as really seeing the beauty all around us is a matter of being present, not simply physically there, but awake and aware and expanding. But it's the poet's closing line describing what he calls a brightness that pulls it all together. It is the turning aside to a brightness that seemed as transitory as your youth once, but is the eternity that awaits you. That's a fascinating thought about what constitutes eternity. The heart of presence, this awakening to the reality of interbeing that holds everything. This is the eternity that awaits us, not in the sense of later, like after death, but there, here, now, all the time. I have seen the sun break through to illuminate a small field for a while and gone my way and forgotten it. But that was the pearl of great price, the one field that had treasure in it. I realize now that I must give all that I have to possess it. Life is not hurrying on to a receding future, nor hankering after an imagined past. It is the turning aside, like Moses, to the miracle of the lit bush, to a brightness that seemed as transitory as your youth once. But it is the eternity that awaits you. So here's the question for this breakout that Carlos will put us into the pairs. What does this stir in you? The experiences you accessed earlier, the special moments of presence that some of you described for us, what were they? What did they imply? An awakening to reality, to life already there, to eternity that is already and always there? Yeah. There's some questions that may be stirring in you, and let me invite Carlos to break us into our rooms again. Enjoy yourselves, and we'll call you back in 10 minutes to see how we can talk about and maybe understand a little bit of what this presence is, so that we can learn to work with it. But thank you, Carlos.
Great.
Well, welcome.
Danny, may I just say thank you to Carlos during this second session that we had a warning that our time was ending. In the first session, we didn't get a warning, and it's kind of shocking to just be in mid-sentence and you're suddenly out of the room. So thank you, Carlos, for giving us a warning this time.
Here.
He was just giving us a taste of life and how suddenly it shifts. Well, that was wonderful. I hope you enjoyed it. I was able to participate in a small group myself, partly accidentally, actually. But let's hear again from 4 voices. Listen to yourself if you feel moved and speak out. What, as I said, I bubbled around a couple of questions, but whatever is moving in you, it doesn't really matter. We're trying to explore, what are we talking about here? What are the implications, perhaps? So who's coming up? Anyone like to share what is moving in them? Anyone? I can see Linda. Linda has raised her hand. Let's hear from Linda.
Well, I was paired again with Jean, which I was delighted because we'd had an opportunity to meet each other in a previous breakout. And Jean is a long-time activist on the streets, and we were talking about what is this transition when you no longer have the capacities, perhaps the inclination even to be out on the streets, but are feeling ever increasingly this upwelling sense of presence and of being able to hold the world in all its suffering and ignorance and wobbling its way, being able to hold it all, and how that is a different kind of activism that is just as satisfying. I mean, so many of us, as we age, feel an increasing sense of being useless. And because we're not capable of doing what we did at midlife or in youth. And so it was just a wonderful conversation with her because she's really living the harvest of a life of activism, and now just as engaged from the place of presence.
That's wonderful. Wonderful, Linda. And I speak to so many of us I know. Who'd like to build on that, comment, move on to another aspect?
I could jump in. Michael
Michael.
from West Virginia, although in Pittsburgh at the moment. We had talked a little bit about the richness of noticing things that you didn't notice before, and I'm a little conscious because I'm in the process of turning over being executive director of a nonprofit I started 36 years ago, but one of the richnesses of this time of life is what we can notice when we're no longer running things or managing things. Doesn't mean that we're not incredibly present and active, but there's just a layer of detail and the moment that you get when you're not managing thousands of moments.
Well put. You can see people responding to that. Anyone like to take that one up or pick on another point? Catherine.
Well, since I am, Michael, just closing out 27 years of running a nonprofit in the criminal justice world, I can resonate very much with what you're saying, but I'd like to say that Pat Monahan and I shared a moment or two of a similar world where we have been working for years in the New York State prison system using art to help people transform. She on her own is individually talking to someone incarcerated in Ohio, and her presence once a week with him is giving validity and authenticity to both of their lives and things that they can talk about. And we both shared the fact that when you are in presence with people who are incarcerated, whose lives really have been deeply depressed on many, many different levels, that just being there and being part of their world is a blessing and a presence that is very fulfilling on many, many levels. And so I would just like to add that to the conversation tonight. And thank you, Pat, for sharing with me.
Thank you, too.
That's so powerful, Catherine. So powerful. Our own presence, perhaps, is maybe the greatest way to be active. One more voice. One more voice.
I guess I could share.
Go, Russ.
Yeah, as we talked, I was with Sue, and as we talked about our experience, that it was sort of what stirred him. Was one thing was awakening to the light that's already there, seeing with different eyes. And, and with a group like this, we don't know each other, and just be moved by this sharing, and a sense too of this is all as part of a larger wholeness, there's just these emerging, and we just really sense that.
Larger wholeness. Let's stay with that for a moment, because that really perhaps summarizes a little bit of the exchange we're having now around, what is presence, and what are the implications for serving? What's the impact of presence, in fact? So we're going to move on to use this as a way of moving on to the third stage of a mindfulness dialogue, which we call discovering, connecting, exploring, as we've done a little bit. And we don't necessarily agree when we explore. That's not the purpose. In fact, sometimes it's to highlight differences, because it's out of the tension between differences that something new, a new insight, a new idea can be generated. So listen, we'll take a moment or two just to breathe together and listen for what we hear ourselves, hear us trying to say. Maybe in many different ways, but there's probably a thread running through it. And if you listen carefully, maybe you can sort of catch it a little bit. It doesn't have to be right or perfect or wise or profound or anything at all, just something that surfaces for you. And we'll hear from 4 more voices in the same way of, what are we hearing ourselves trying to say about presence? What are you hearing? And when you're ready, just speak rather than, there's Marianne has raised her hand, so go for it, Marianne.
What comes to me is the word ineffable. It's something that words cannot be put to, that can't be explained. But, I could tell with the 2 breakouts that we had, each of the people that I was with, we kind of were breathing the same breath, and coming, having the same experience, knew what each other's experience was, and understanding what presence is, but not exactly being able to put words about it. We can explain the situation maybe, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, we began with that. We have so many words, but sometimes when you meet something or someone and you're really present, there are no words. What else are we saying? Do you hear us saying? Do I see Josie?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I had an interaction with Muriel, but really her name is Mickey. And she is dear. You better, if you could have a breakout, try to match with her, because she's dear. For me, it was how alive she is, and maybe the definition of presence, or not definition, but part of being present, is that aliveness. It's not alive that I am here and I'm alive and I'm, my heart is pumping and all that. There is a spirit of being alive, of a joy in life. And then she related, something. But the best part for me, meeting her and being with her in her present, is that when she says goodbye, she says to me, I'm going to ask permission from you to keep you in my heart.
Oh,
She has no idea what that meant for me.
oh,
Has no idea what her words and her kindness has meant for me right now.
that's beautiful, Josie. That's
I think I
because
heard that. I'm going to say that to the therapist. I'm going to ask permission to say goodbye. Let's see what she says.
that takes ineffable to another level as well. Takes ineffable to another level. So we're building something here. What else do you hear us saying? Go ahead, Jean.
Yes,
Dennis.
I think we're saying that we're discovering space, a space, and that our very aging and not being able, for me, I can't walk very well now. So I have to go slower. I have to sit. And our very aging is creating this space for us to slow down, to be present, and that our very becoming elders is giving us the space to go into this whole new place, this whole new consciousness, and to go, and at the same time, the technology that's been developed is allowing us to do this with other people all over the world. And wow, talk about not being useless. This is, we're on the cusp of a place that we can change the world more than we ever. So I think that's what we're saying.
That's wonderful, Jean. And Carlos would be applauding in the background. I know you'll say at the end, because our conversation, this session is really a catalyst to begin the rest of our conversation for this month coming on this. We've only opened it up a little bit. So I think Janice were you going to say something, Janice? No? No. Oh, Jerome. We'll finish with Jerome. I think you're on mute, Jerome.
Yeah, thank you, Jane, for bringing in the term slow. And I think we see slowness in our culture anyway, which is not, we don't want to talk in generalities, I realize that, but we talk about slow as an indulgence as opposed to a way of taking care of ourselves. And I think that's what I find in the times when I'm present, is when I really slow down, really take the time, let my senses open my soul to the world. And I love that John O'Donoghue talks about our senses are the threshold to the soul. And if we are hurrying, we don't really give them an opportunity to open. Our eyes, our sense of smell, our hearing, all of those need time to be cultivated and to open up. So that's what
I think we're saying something really, really important here. You can feel it. Something new, as Jean highlighted. Something ineffable. Something deeply beautiful that we perhaps don't even appreciate that we can do for each other. A slowing down, as Jerome says, that allows us to make the space to do this. I want to see if I can pull together a couple of the threads only towards the continuing conversation. And then I'm going to hand it over to Carlos to help us remember how to continue the conversation. I'm going to summarize by sharing a poem that I'll also put up on the screen by D.H. Lawrence called Escape. Before I put it up, the heart of it is this: lest we think that presence is a passive thing, lest we think that presence is just self-indulgence, the way Jerome was saying that it's not, of course. D.H. Lawrence in this poem highlights that it's an escape from the illusions that we have lived by, that it's an opportunity to waken up. It's an opportunity to be filled with new power. It's a new form of activism that we can embrace at this stage of our lives. So let me share the screen and just scroll down here. When we get out of the glass bottles of our ego, and when we escape like squirrels, turning in the cages of our personality and get into the forests again, we shall shiver with cold and fright, but things will happen to us so that we don't know ourselves. Cool, unlying life will rush in, and passion will make our bodies taut with power. We shall stamp our feet with new power, and old things will fall down. We shall laugh, and institutions will curl up like burnt paper. Let me just muse on it for 1 second and then ask, I'm not sure if Kathleen is there to read it again for us. If not, we'll be calling on someone else, so be prepared. The forests, when we get out of the glass bottles, or when we escape like squirrels and get into the forest, they're clearly a reference to the primeval reality of interbeing that we once knew and still sense beneath the chaos and confusion we've created in our world. And Lawrence, the poet, is clearly describing a world that he has at least glimpsed. A world that is not like our world of false control and security, rather one that will bring us to our knees, where we shall shiver with cold and fright before the mystery. In some ways, that's what we've been articulating tonight. However, if we can stay with the transformational process, if we can help each other to stay with this transformational process, new things will simply emerge to redefine who we are. Cool, unlying life will rush in, and passion will make our bodies taut with power. And he goes on to highlight the next stage of this redefinition process. We shall stamp our feet with new power, and old things will fall down. And finally, there is the ultimate power, laughter. No longer need to wonder whether we are doing something important or whether we shall succeed. We shall laugh, and institutions will curl up like burnt paper. When we awake like this, when we learn to be present like this, to the eternity that has been there all the time, to the field that is beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, all kinds of things can happen. This is where the power for change is, always has been, and we're being invited into it again. And this, I would add, is the power of elders, the power of presence, of being in touch with the power that moves all things. So, dear Kathleen, could you read it for us and let us savor it as we hand over to Carlos?
When we get out of the glass bottles of our ego, and when we escape like squirrels, turning in the cages of our personality and get out into the forests again, we shall shiver with cold and fright. But things will happen to us so that we don't know ourselves. Cool, unlying life will rush in, and passion will make our bodies taut with power. We shall stamp our feet with new power, and old things will fall down, and we shall laugh, and institutions will curl up like burnt paper. It's fun.
Isn't that such a powerful, funny, and beautiful piece? So this is to open us up to the continuing conversation. Let me invite Carlos to remind us how we can do that in our Eldering in Grace program.
So to state the obvious, Danny and I have been working on trying to find different ways that we can really sing Jean's tune that she was talking about earlier. How can we help? How can we use the technologies that are present, that are available to us now, to help us be more present to each other? Is it possible? I want to say from the start that Danny and I are not clear that it is. This is an experiment. We don't know if this is going to add, what we're suggesting is going to add to our experience. It might detract, and it's an open question. But what Danny and I would like to do is invite you to be part of this experiment. You know, what would it take to have large conversations on Zoom that we couldn't have before? What would it take to have conversations where every voice is heard because we have an AI companion present to us? We're playing with these ideas, and we think they could have powerful implications if we turn them into a type of ritual. We're used to ritual helping us do important things, and we believe these are new rituals that we can practice together, maybe become much more comfortable with them, and turn them into a habit. So, and when we leave today, we're going to ask you to do 4 things. Be aware of 4 things. The first one is that in the next 5 minutes, if you can turn the next 5 minutes into a ritual of leave taking, take 5 minutes and reflect on what one thing that was really stood out for you, that was maybe a new insight, a new learning, a new experience, something that was an aha moment for you in today's gathering. Capture it and send it to us in an email. And we'll have AI put together a new story of what is being captured by all of us. Maybe it's going to be something interesting, maybe it won't. But if you could be part of the experiment, that's what we're looking for. The second thing is, in a couple of days,
Call out that email and I'll write it down again.
it's contact@anewglobalwe.com. The second ritual that I want you to participate in is, in a couple of days, look for go look at the YouTube channel that we're developing. It's called A New Global We, and we'll send you, we've sent you some links to it, but look at it because you will have the recording of this session. And underneath the recording will be the AI summary. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when you look at it, review it. Is it capturing the nuance of what we're talking about? Is it capable of it? That's the open question. And we would love for you to comment below the video about that experience of the summaries that you're getting from AI. Are they true to what you've experienced? Is it missing something? Is it adding something? Let's discover this together. The third thing is, let's see, what's the third thing? Yeah, well, I said to comment on it. The fourth thing is essentially to mid-month, you will receive another offering from us. It's usually either a meditation or an interview. There'll be different things, and we'd like for you to engage. Basically, the idea is we're trying to find ways that we can engage, not just live like we're doing tonight, but maybe asynchronously. Can we have an asynchronous dialogue that is meaningful and deeper than anything we've ever experienced online? We think it's possible with some of these techniques that we're using, and we'd love for you to explore it with us and become partners in this experiment.
Thank you, Brother Carlos. And let me hand it to our dear friend and leader, Kathleen, to close us out for this evening.
I'm sure that we are all full
here.
of that
I'm cooking my food.
big sense of presence that we've been conjuring this evening. And I want to be able to voice all of us, all of our gratitude to Danny. Danny, thank you for animating this and for being such a wise and eloquent elder, bringing us into these depths. And I want to thank Carlos for helping us to do this, the work really to which some of us might have been resistant, of pioneering and experimenting with those new skills that are being developed, that it is our responsibility to give soul to. And so thank you both. We will do our homework and we'll see each other in a month. So stay tuned for some invitations to come. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, everybody.